Okay, and we're back. Welcome to Casa Conversations. We have again with us Jake and Michael from Guns and Mental Health Podcast and Walk the Talk America, a fantastic organization for helping individuals kind of recognize what their mental health status is or their state, and we're hoping that there's a path to taking some action. And one thing that I did want to ask these guys about as I bring them back in is regarding the red flag laws. There's a ton of them. Every state has their own version and different way of kind of operating. It seems they exist. Many places. If you say the wrong thing, there are laws that will come swoop you up and put you before a judge, or not put you before a judge, and just take your guns, and then you might be fighting for like a year to say like, hey, I'm healthy now. Can I have my guns back? Because I believe that it's my right to have them as a U.S. citizen that hasn't done anything wrong. And I'm not saying that I have the answer, but I assume this is something that you guys have talked about and think about often, often enough. Um, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Whoever wants to go first.
Mike has all the answers.
There you go. Go ahead,
All
Mike.
right. Jake Jake has mostly the answers on this. I will tell you this, that we're very much against red flag laws. Um, it's a slap in the face, in my opinion, just because you're struggling, you're in crisis. There's really no easy path to restoration of your rights, but they don't really care about you because they don't come to your house and take all the things that could kill you. They don't take the garage door off. They don't take the rope out of the house, the knives. They don't even get you a treatment plan. But they take your guns as if that's going to be the thing, that you're just going to default to. And there's plenty of ways you can hurt yourself if you're in crisis. So, yeah, it's something that we've dealt with, and we kind of look at ourselves as the alternative to red flag laws. In the way of let's catch people early, like let's get them help early, let's swim upstream to prevent the unpredictable, and get them to be okay so they don't hit that stage 4 where maybe behavior could kind of go off the rails. But the danger, like you said, with red flag laws is it's all in the eye of the beholder, right? The opinion of that person. In um, some states like New York, it doesn't even matter if you just go get help, you're going to be put on a list, and that could be
Right.
for anxiety, So you got to be very careful there. But Jake has a lot of thoughts on this. He actually breaks down red flag laws in our cultural competence course. So I'm just kick it back to you, Jake, because I think what you say is fascinating about it.
Well, look at that. There you go, Jake. One more time. Tell us what you think about these red flag laws. And I'm curious if you have kind of an answer that leads us to some sort of path of voluntary help, or volunteering yourself to get help should you kind of be in a situation where red flag laws might apply to you.
So it's tricky. And I do explain it deeper in the cultural competence course. The cultural
Mm-hmm.
competence course isn't just for clinicians. Anybody can download that at our website, watch it on YouTube. It's 3.5 hours long. It's very rich. Rob Pincus does a very good job of explaining firearms and their function and the culture. I talk about mental health stuff, and I spend a probably a good 30-35 minutes on red flag laws. And if you're not familiar with what a red flag law is, it's common parlance for something called an extreme risk protection order, and the acronym I'll use is ERPO, ERPO. So think about a protection order against somebody who's done something to you. You want to the media and the movies, the TV shows call it a restraining order, but it's called a protection order, and it's an order from a court that says don't be around this person, right? You can't come within 150 feet of them or whatever. We have the same thing in the form of a firearms protection order where you're exhibiting these risky behaviors, extremely risky behaviors. So we need to protect you and others. So goes the state, legislation that says we'll take the most dangerous thing from you, and that's your firearms. So the way it goes is you're exhibiting these behaviors, uh, and most states mirror each other. So I'm speaking in blanket terms, but please understand that not every state has the exact same language, but mostly they're the same, except for what Mike said, which is New York. They're very different. But in most states that have these red flag laws, it's either police So law enforcement or a family member can petition a court or a judge to issue an order to remove your guns from your home.
Hmm.
And there's lots of debate about whether or not it violates certain constitutional protections, not the least of which is the Second Amendment, but also Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment, Sixth. So anyway, we'll set that aside and leave that for the constitutional scholars to debate. I certainly have an opinion on it, but my opinion is not merited, I guess, until it goes to court. So here's the problem. If a family member thinks that you're unstable and they think that you're going to shoot somebody or yourself, they can ask a court. And all they need is reasonable suspicion. Now, if you're familiar with the burden of proof ladder, reasonable suspicion is the lowest rung on that ladder that we need to establish evidence to ascertain something. So, family member needs reasonable suspicion to file this petition with the court. It says, I reasonably suspect that Mike is going to go do something bad with his guns. The judge then can take the petition, and the judge needs a preponderance of evidence. Now, I'm standing on Nevada law because that's the one I know very well. And if you're from states or the East Coast that pronounce our name with an H or a W, it is Nevada, not Nevada. So Nevada law says the judge needs a preponderance of evidence from that reasonable suspicion to issue an order. Law enforcement needs probable cause to file the petition. So probable cause is a rung above reasonable suspicion, just below preponderance of evidence. All right, fine. So let's say this gets executed, and let's say that nobody gets harmed in the process, because you can imagine deputies showing up at your door saying, "Oh, Mr. Sedini, we have this order to remove all firearms from your home because somebody said that you're a risk to self or others." That might not go down so well. So police also are skittish about carrying out these orders even when they're issued because there's a high risk for danger. All right, well, let's say that all goes smoothly. There's two types of order: temporary and extended, just like in your regular protection orders. Temporary orders can be issued with or without the adverse party present, meaning Mike may or may not be present for the hearing when this is determined. That's called an ex parte order, meaning one party has to be present. And that party is the accuser, not the accused. So imagine Mike being very surprised to find this out. Maybe he's got a jilted ex-lover who thinks that he's, off his rocker, and that qualifies as a family member, perhaps. So he gets his guns taken. That order lasts no longer than 7 days. But in that 7 days, they can file what's called an extended order or a petition for an extended order. And that extended order can be any time that the judge sets, up to a year. And that you referenced that when you said, could be as long as a year. So you have to be, the accused has to be present for that. But while we're waiting for the hearing for the extended order, you still don't have your guns. So that hearing takes as long as the court takes to create the appointment. Now, it could be 3 months. And it's a year on top of those 3 months. So the problem is, after that's executed, if Mike does what he needs to do to get well, maybe it's just a cold shower and a couple of good nights sleep. Maybe it's full-blown psychotherapy. I don't know. But Mike says, I'm not off my rocker anymore. I'm safe. In overturning or dissolving or removing the protection order, the judge needs clear and convincing evidence, which is the top rung of the burden of proof ladder. Well, the problem is we don't know what clear and convincing evidence is, and it's totally up to the judge. Usually what they say is, hey, go get yourself evaluated by a mental health professional, psychologist, maybe a marriage and family therapist like myself, if we're allowed to do that in whatever state you're in. And they can certify that you're not going to shoot somebody as soon as we give these back. The problem with that is there's none of us out there to do it because nobody knows what's being asked of them, because there is no gun certification or decertification standard. There's no metric or tool. There's no assessment inventory we can issue. So that person's left just kind of looking around, wondering what's going to happen. The psychologist maybe doesn't want to take on the burden of doing that. They don't want to take on the risk or the liability. And if they do, Mike's probably going to be out about $1,500 to $3,000 to get that evaluation done. and that's presuming that he has means. So this creates a lot of issues. And by the way, where are the guns stored in the meantime? Are they stored at the police station? Are they inventoried? Who takes possession of them? So there's all sorts of very problematic issues with these red flag laws. But the biggest one, and we now have some research out of New York State that suggests that, and with very, very, very conservative numbers, suggest that 9% of gun owners will actively resist going into care for their mental health treatment because they are afraid their rights are going to be taken away. Now, loosely applied, there's an estimate that 20% of New Yorkers own guns over the age of 18. They own guns. We know it's higher than that, but we'll say 20%. 20% times the 9% equals about 288,000 New Yorkers who would resist seeking care. Now, in New York, the New York SAFE Act, they put your name into a database if they think that you're scary or whatever and you're unstable, and they've tracked these, and you can listen to Sandy Richardson on our podcast talk about how she came to these numbers. There's about 14,000 people, maybe 16, or somewhere between 14 and 16,000 now people since the New York SAFE Act law has been in effect who have been allegedly, kept safe, versus the 288,000 who would not seek care. The numbers just don't work out. We're pushing people away from care at a much, much greater rate than we're actually saving lives, if and only if these laws actually do what they're supposed to. And we're not inviting other unintended consequences, like, say, a domestic abuse survivor who bought a firearm to protect herself against the abuser. Maybe she's having a bad day. Maybe somebody thinks that she's not going to be safe, and the state steps in and removes that firearm from her. You just victimize that person again, and you open them up to more victimization because she doesn't have the tool to protect her that she chose to. So there's lots and lots of ripple effects across this that I would love to talk about. But as an organization, as a 501c3 and not a 501c4, we're not politically active. We don't take legislative stances. We don't advocate for or against policies, but we certainly want to educate on what these policies might do. And now we have evidence. It's not just suspicion or anecdotes coming through our social media accounts or our emails at the Walk the Talk website saying, hey, I'm afraid to go get help. Where can I turn? We now have evidence. It's empirical. It's been researched, and it's overly conservative too.
Yeah, and that's scary. And I mentioned this before. I have a younger sibling who's in the military, and he seems fine. But I wonder if he was going through something, would he be able to get help without being seen as some sort of liability, losing clearances, or even being, if he was having a bad, few days, few weeks, few months, discharged in such a way that it kind of messes up his life, messes up his career.
And to that point, Isaac Ritchie tells his story on our podcast about how he actually did the right thing. His command staff got him the help that he needed. He just happened to be stationed in New York. New York put his name into a database, and he's permanently now deemed unfit to carry. And he's having a real tough time getting his name off that list. He wanted to be a police officer after he discharged. So congratulations, New York State. You just took a cop off the streets. He got help. He was well.
Tell me the irony of the whole situation, Jake. Because
the irony, and he says this in the podcast, he's like, 2 weeks after I got discharged from the hospital, I was doing well. I was firing rocket launchers again.
Incredible.
But 3 years later, he still can't get employed because he can't possess a firearm anywhere in the country because he's in the NICS database. It's insane.
Crazy. Firing rocket launchers, but they can't trust him with a handgun. Yeah.
No. So, you asked about what are the alternatives, and we do address that in the course, but Rob Pincus has a great video on it. What do alternatives to handing your guns over to somebody. So maybe you live in a state like Nevada, not Nevada that has red flag laws. And, oh, by the way, there's a transfer law that says you must undergo a background check if you give your gun to anyone who's not an immediate family member, a gunsmith or armorer, or you're just out on the range shooting. So it's temporary and you're in their presence. They do have a sort of a quasi Good Samaritan exemption, but it reads something to the effect of you're only allowed to keep the guns from somebody so long as the emergency passes, and it's got to be temporary. So we don't know what temporary means. We don't know how long so long as immediately necessary is defined. So we've got it creates a very chilling effect on people like me taking Mike's guns if he's in a crisis, because I don't want to become, in Nevada, we have something called a gross misdemeanor. I don't want to become a gross misdemeanor, and I don't want to become a felon in any of the other states that, tab is a felony. So what do we do? Well, you could take an operational part from the gun that renders it useless, something like a bolt or a bolt carrier group or a firing pin. You might just take the upper, right? Something that's non-serialized, that's not going to turn you into a felon. It's not counted as a gun, because the serialized parts are the gun part as far as the laws are concerned. You
Right.
can also take it down to a range and ask if they can keep it for you. They may inventory it. They may background you when you have to take it back because it's part of their inventory, and that's just part of the law. But at least you're safe, right? And you don't have to involve the authorities or .gov. Another great way to do it is, Mike will talk more about this, is change the codes on your own safes. And we're working with safe companies like VeriSafe and Canon on some really cool technology. So there are options. If you're living next door to somebody who you trust and and they're like, I don't have space for your 38 rifles, you might have a baggie, and a baggie can hold 38 bolts. That's okay.
Right.
But Mike, talk about some of the technology, because it's really cool.
Yeah, there's some technology coming out. VeriSafety is kind of leading the charge on that. There's a couple other companies now that are kind of getting into that space, but the concept. So I have all these little stories I've collected over the years, but in 2018, when I actually had the meeting with Mental Health America and discovered that they didn't really have any programs that they could fund, I remember getting an Uber, right? And I was in Denver. I was getting an Uber to go back to Vegas, and I'm sitting in the car with the Uber driver, and he saw Rob Pincus's car, like, because it was parked out in front of his house. That's where they picked me up from, and it's really funny. We're driving, and when I get an Uber, I always look at my phone or just try to stay quiet. And the guy was obviously asking me about firearms. He was into firearms because he saw Rob's car looks like a NASCAR with all these different logos, and he said, I thought, okay, this is going to shut him up, because I'm going to be like, yeah, I work in the mental health and firearm space, because that usually does it if it makes people uncomfortable or they want to talk about it more. But he actually pulled his car over on the side of the highway, and it was funny because he's like, I got to talk to you about something. And he turned. He's like, God put you in this car for a reason. And I thought, okay, this is the reason I'm going to die. Like, this is it. But it was really cool. He talked about how he suffered from Lyme disease. And if for those that don't know, Lyme disease attacks your nervous system and your brain. So many people that have Lyme disease, sometimes it's misdiagnosed as mental illness. But he came up with this story. He was like, "Yeah, my wife is instructed." He goes, "Anytime I go into crisis, and it could last like 1 to 5 days, it's like my wife's instructed to take the firearms out of the house." And he's like, she does it. And I told her, we have an agreement that she brings them back when she feels comfortable, but she knows me. And I thought, wow, what a perfect example of responsible gun ownership that nobody ever talks about, right? Like, because that's not what's going to get told in stories and things like that. But it really was cool. So I went home, and I went to lunch with the people who own Canon Safe, and I was telling them about the story, and they were like, well, what if we built some kind of technology that could be like you know a kill switch to the safe? So basically, like, if you needed to lock it up for like 6 days or 2 hours or 2 weeks, right? Like, you could do it through an app, and it would be something that both parties would agree on, right? Like this husband and wife from Colorado. And I thought it was brilliant, and that kind of was the start of getting safe companies to start thinking about this type of technology. And it looks like it's going that route now. Every safe company that I've talked with is, they toe the line when it comes to like 2A and privacy and everything like that. But
Mhm.
it's one of those things where I feel like it's like your car radio, right? Like, if you never would use that feature, then you don't have to. But just the fact that there are 2A safe companies that are looking for ways to help prevent suicide, and help people that are in crisis, I think that's really great, because not everybody has the opportunity to kind of, in some states, like in Nevada, we can't take the gun out of the house. Like, you know, you can get in trouble for that. And we don't want to make people like criminals or, you know, put people in bad situations. And then forget that. Like, just even forget the laws. Some people don't even want to handle firearms. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know anything about guns and they don't want to go take somebody's gun. So if we can make, you know, opportunities available to gun owners to be able to say, okay, like we can just keep them locked up in the house where no one will have access to them. I think that's great. And then, you know, if people say like, well, I never would use that, then you go, well, what about if you went to Hawaii? Like, I think about it like right now, if my wife and I went to Hawaii, I'd love a way to just like shut down the safe. You know what I mean? Like, so no one can get into it, and then you know, activate it when I come back. So, you know, that's what I mean though. There's steps that we can do as a community to make these opportunities. We don't need government. You know, we don't need law enforcement to do it. We could do it ourselves as the 2A community.
Yeah, no, I've actually, when you were talking, I was thinking about there's some companies that have like apps and Wi-Fi connected safes, and they're kind of like bells and whistly. And it's like, oh, that seems like a little extra. How much does that add to the price? Oh, another $500. Crazy. But I think if that became like an industry standard, that would be really cool in the sense that we can find ways to, I guess, for the safes that aren't using the most basic technology to allow the gun owner. Because, I mean, actually, I was talking with a coworker one time, and she was saying that her brother, she was an older lady, her brother was going nuts. He had some issues. He somehow he had some guns, and he had at some point fired around into somewhere, and it wasn't such a situation where I don't think they felt comfortable like calling the police or really escalating it like that, because that's kind of a permanent solution. Um, but it was a situation where they were like, we need a, I guess, when he goes to his doctor's appointment, get the guns out of the house and just trying to concoct ways. And there are plenty of people who literally have no idea what to do with a gun. And it would be dangerous for them to try to move a gun from point A to point B, because you can kill yourself if you're a complete idiot with a gun, as in ignorant with a gun. That said, I think that's really cool that you are having these conversations. Maybe that implementation doesn't really work, because you know there's some things that are great ideas, but in reality they just don't pan out the way they want to. I suppose what are some issues that you see with a system like this? Do you see any at all, or
No, you know, to me, it goes back. I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole of everything,
sure?
right? You could literally go, oh, well, what if hackers from China could break into it and keep
Oh
it away?
gosh, don't say that.
But I mean, like for
They're
me, like I
listening right now.
Right.
for me, it's like I said this to like a couple times when people would ask me about it and they were like concerned, and I would say it's like you don't throw your car stereo out because you don't like country
Yeah.
western, right? Like it, once again, I feel like one of the biggest issues that the 2A community in the firearms industry has is that the perception of us is that we don't do anything.
Mm.
And for many years, I think we've been on the defensive. It's easy to be defensive when people say you have blood on your hands for something you didn't do, right? It's like I didn't go into that school, or I didn't, you know, we're not celebrating when there's tragedy. The gun industry is the gun industry. As a matter of fact, when tragedy happens, not only is it heartbreaking just from the level of loss of life, but um, as a business owner, we hate that. We hate when there's these unnecessary spikes in sales because we know they're not real. And what happens is that you can't you can't forecast, you can't do all these things because nothing is real. So you
Yeah.
see this giant jump, and then what happens is there's a giant crash,
On
right?
just the most like practical business side,
Yeah,
it's messing with the numbers.
yeah, messing with the numbers. So I've never seen that. So, but you know, back to the point, I think
Yeah.
it's so important for the firearms industry to be able to walk into any meeting or whatever it is, whether it's on the Hill in Washington, right? And be able to smash that perception that we don't do anything.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. We've developed technology for this, and no one made us do it. We did it ourselves, right? Like I know a lot. There's a lot of pushback on you know, firearms that would have like biometrics and stuff like that. And my whole thing is like, who cares? Like if you want to make it and people want to buy that and there's a market for it, but don't make people buy that.
Right.
Don't make companies put that on there, right? Like if you don't want a safe that has a crisis sleep mode, don't buy that safe. But I think there are more people, and that's what I would consider everybody on this call, probably everybody that listens to your show, like the above average, 2A person, right? Like we love this, we live this, but we got to understand that gun owners come in all, especially now,
Mhm.
after COVID and everything like that. Um, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and not all of them understand how important like the Constitution is and everything. You know what I mean? Like they don't look at it. They just like, I just bought a gun for home protection. So they
Right.
might like something like that. That might make them feel better about the community. Like, oh, there's these really cool things inside the gun industry. I think every time we do something as a whole that shows progress on our side because we chose to do it, because I was a real big believer in that. Like when I ran Eagle Imports, it was like, don't come to me with a problem unless you have a solution. I don't care if it's a stupid solution.
Yeah.
I need a solution. I don't need you to point out problems. So
That is really interesting that you say that because I was approached a couple months ago by somebody who's running some orgs who were like pro freedom, and then they were like, "Hey, we're trying to do some collaboration with these people who are for like gun safety and stuff," and that's like a big red flag in the gun world. Gun safety is like a dog whistle, like code word for we're coming for them guns. We're taking them rifles. Heck yes, we're coming for your AR-15s, like that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, maybe they just chose the wrong word. Let me see what they're all about. Like, give me their agenda because they're out of Texas. And there was some stuff in there that I was like, okay, they're really trying to help. It's a bunch of little old ladies who really do want to make a difference. They're from Texas, so they're not like completely anti-gun, but they're willing to do things that a lot of like die-hard 2A guys would literally like, have a big problem with. Like, okay, I don't know if I can work with you guys on these issues particularly, just because you're for red flags, you're for this, you're for that. And the question that I had in my mind, I'm like, not what compromises are we willing to have, but what innovations are we willing to kind of bring, or like what ideas are we willing to bring to the market to allow us to kind of take a hold of our own narrative and say like, listen guys, like I know you think we're doing nothing, like you just said, we have all these things because if you listen to the guys at DC Project at all, they're for education, not legislation. And what kind of education are we putting out there? What ideas are we doing? What are some things that don't require acts of Congress because they're not going to do it if we paid them to do it? Oh wait, we do, but they're not going to do it. And I suppose that's the question. And from what it sounds like, from what you're telling me, is like, okay, we're coming up with the ideas on like, what if we figured out a way to help people that we can actually identify are at risk and help them with their safes so that maybe they don't hurt themselves, because that's a very real possibility. And like, what are some other things that we can do? Are these? Do you have any other ideas? I'm super curious now. I'm like, I want to have these conversations.
Yeah, I analogize it to my own profession. I think that we lived in the shadows for so long that we created a chasm, a void where nobody existed, and we perpetuate a lot of the stigma in mental health, right? We as practitioners, like I literally got taught in grad school, if you see one of your clients, I call them patients because it's more appropriate, it aligns us more with the medical community, but if you see one of your patients in public, don't acknowledge them. They are the holder of the privilege, the sanctity of confidentiality, all that stuff. And so we were basically
Hmm.
told to make it weird. Nobody else does that. My orthopedist doesn't do that. My attorney doesn't do that. My financial advisor goes golf with me. It's like they all hold sacred private information, but they're not weird about it. We're weird about it. And as a
Mm-hmm.
result, we fail to advocate to tell people what we do. And so we've always been on our heels, wondering
Like
who's
it's a
going to
HIPAA
sue us or
violation
who's
or
going to.
something.
It's just ridiculous. Like everybody's afraid of being sued in my profession, which is the most ridiculous thing ever because we have the lowest liability insurance of all the mental health or all the medical professions. It's a couple $100 a year. It's nothing because nobody ever sues us. But we get programmed to think that if I got told that business cards were unethical because it's solicitation and solicitation is against ethics. I got told that I can't be on social media or do podcasts or radio shows because it's quote unquote treatment without consent, because somebody may listen to what I say and they didn't consent to that. It's like, stop it. This is why we have a problem. So anyway, we created this void, and then pandemic hits and everybody's getting crazy. And so who steps into that void? Big multi-million dollar companies that do online therapy. And they said, this is what therapy looks like. And now all of us freak out and we're like, no, 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 no. That's not efficacious. That's not research. There's no fidelity to it. But now what does everybody think therapy is? So the pendulum swung from nobody talks about mental illness to everybody needs a therapist. And it's like, no, you don't. And I think the firearms community, because I'm the new guy here, right? Like, even though I've gun owner my whole life, I wasn't in the culture until like 2020. I've seen the firearms community almost parallel this stuff with their politics, their infighting, their tribalism, their turf warring, and they've been on their heels defensively. And to Mike's point, like, what has to happen now is an assertive, confident presence. And I love that. I mean, I don't love it. I don't like big tent politics, but honestly, like the NRA, it's got some flaws. And I'm seeing this really cool grassroots movement of a bunch of different organizations instead of the big umbrella. We've got a bunch of little umbrellas that all represent different demographics, and I think that's really cool. They all need to start advocating, but they also need to start advertising. Kind of like my profession needs to start advertising. What is it we do? What can you expect when you come into the counseling office? And we just struck up a great partnership with the Bay Area Black Gun Owners Association, because Black people and gun owners suffer a lot of the same stigmas. And oh, by the way, they're also isolative, right? They don't often step out for help. So what bridges that gap? Mental health connection. So they're starting to say, yeah, it's okay to talk. It's okay to advocate. It's okay to be pro 2A. It's okay to defend this civil right that's God given. And more organizations like that are doing that and becoming a little more loud, a little more vocal, a little more assertive, a little more self-confident. And as that continues to happen, I think the innovation is going to come along with it, because instead of being defensive from all the gun attacks, like mass shooting, control the guns, it's like, okay, that's not statistically relevant or possible. Oh my God, you don't care about mass shootings. Like, I do.
I mean, I've been called.
I would rather move the
murderer
needle on
myself.
something that matters, right? Yeah, I would rather move the needle on something that matters. And if we're talking about 60-ish% of gun deaths or suicides, what do we hit? Mental illness. And oh, by the way, we might catch some of those mass shooters if we do. So to Nathan James just chimes in there. He says, personally, I feel like we in the 2A community give solutions, but anti-gun lobbies refuse to listen. It's like, yeah, well, maybe that's not our audience. Maybe our audience is the 130-ish million people who are gun owners and all the people who are indifferent. Because I think the anti-gun people are like 3 or 4 standard deviations away from the mean. They're not statistically relevant, and we don't need to be changing their minds, because they're not going to change. We need to be targeting people who are in the community, almost like, like now I'm feeling like I'm on stage at the church. It's like Jesus and his disciples didn't talk to the non-believers. They talked to the believers and said, you correct your behaviors in this and such way. It wasn't about recruitment from without. It was about alignment from within. And I think that's the messaging. It's like, it's okay to talk about responsible storage, which, by the way, we've been, I'd like to say we've been instrumental in redefining. We're going away from the word safe, which has been watered down and kind of, I don't know, highly subjective, right? To responsible. So responsible storage is defined as preventing unauthorized access. And how do you do that? Well, keep people away who aren't supposed to be there. Maybe one of those days you're the person who's not supposed to have access. And it's okay to talk about this, right? So as we change the culture, we change the narrative, we just draw more people in, because the neutral people or the indifferent people or the ambivalent people are going to see that and go, that's a culture I can be a part of, instead of like the zealotry, which is off-putting.
Yeah, absolutely. And really quickly, you just made me think about it. As most of you guys know, who have paid attention to the podcast, we have a special event coming up on April 8th here in the city of Tyler, Texas, where we're introducing people who have never fired firearms before into classes so that we can actually make that happen for them, get them some ammo, get them some training, get them some guns, and let them try out different firearms. And it's coming up April 8th. That said, Hornady has just sent me the order confirmation that they're sending out 5 personal safes or lock boxes or whatever you want to call them. So, and we're going to be giving those away, and that's just super exciting for me because I'm like, dang, like we get to do that. We get to give these away. No one has to buy anything. Hornady is partnering with us so that you can have that. They're also sending out some ammo, but I'm less excited about that just because ammo's ammo. But this is it's a big deal. So if you have questions about that, shoot me a DM on Instagram, armed_atlas, and we'll talk about that. Let's get back.
If you're
to,
not excited about ammo, I will be excited about ammo, and you can just send it to me.
I mean, we're all excited about ammo, but I've been on this responsible storage kick. You know what I mean? So I'm just like, yes, more options for people, because it's one of those things where you go to a gun store, you buy a gun, you might not buy a holster that day, you might not buy a belt, you might buy some Uncle Mike's thing and then like attach it to your waistband, and then now you're working your way up. Now you get a real holster. Now you finally get a belt from Walmart that'll actually hold it a little bit. Where does the safe storage option come in on that list? I know for myself, it took like years before. Yeah, and
it did.
I'm
I
ashamed
mean,
to say
I didn't
that,
get I didn't get serious about it until I was part of this organization, and then I was like, well, I'm gonna have to walk my talk, and I bought a big boy safe, right? Like I had a pistol
Yeah.
safe, but my hunting rifle and my shotgun were leaning in the closet, and granted, I had no small kids. I mean, now I have small kids, but my kids were babies. They couldn't even, they were crawling, right? And they're
Right.
not wielding a shotgun. But who's going to break into my home? It's unsecured, right? I don't want that falling into somebody else's hands. I don't care about
Right.
any debate about like, oh, you know, it's secured if it's in my home and I shouldn't be punished. Okay, that's fine. That's a policy discussion. But what's the responsible thing to do?
Yeah.
Take it the next step, right? No, nobody should be breaking in your home. Nobody should be breaking in your car. But the fact is, it happens. So let's align expectations with reality and defend against that. Put a safe in your truck. When you go into a place you're not allowed to carry, you don't feel like breaking the law, put it in a Vaultec, you know, like put it in a quick release safe. And Mike's got a great phrase that he says to the people who are like, no, I need access everywhere at all times because ISIS might kick in my door at 3 a.m. and I need to be ready, right? And I got to have guns under every pillow. Okay, well, that's fine. Do you have kids in the home? Do you have angsty teenagers around? If you do, put it in a quick access safe and practice retrieving your firearm as much as you practice putting lead on target.
Yeah.
Train is hard. We brag about how much we train.
Yeah.
Like, you know, gun owners just love talking about. I did this 3-day course. I took this AR course, and it's just like
I took a pretty serious course a few days ago myself. But yeah,
yeah. See, there you go. But see, like, that's the thing, though. We could also brag about how much we train retrieving our firearm, right? Like I could do it in my sleep, right? Firearm right here, and it's quick access safe, and I can literally turn all the lights off here and do it because there are times when I sit there and do it, even when I'm talking to people like this. You know, I just run my
routine.
Yeah. So it's just
bam.
So, yep. But I want to address like Nathan James' comment. Yeah, I think we do. We've always preached education, and we always preach like responsible gun ownership. And for the most part, they don't listen. They want to listen. But I think what I'm talking about is bigger than that, because it's like, okay, whatever, they're not going to listen. But when I walk into a room, or Jake and I walk into a room, and I do this a lot. I walk into a lot of rooms with people that are anti-gun, or people who think they're not anti-gun, but they are, like Brady, or, you know, Moms Demand Action and stuff like that. But when I walk into those rooms, I want to be like Ali in Olympic Village, right? I want everyone to be playing for the silver medal. Like, I already won this. Like Mike Tyson, right? He used to walk into the room and he knew you were going to get knocked out. And I want to be better than all those organizations or all the suicide prevention organizations. And it's worked that way. Just because of what we're doing is so unique, right? Like I always share this story when I first started and we were putting the card in the firearms boxes. At that time, I think I only had like 6 or 7 manufacturers doing it. But, you know, I was at this mental health conference in Washington D.C. and I went to go buy this group of people that I was kind of hanging out with a drink. I was getting the next round, and one of the guys was like, "Hey man, before you buy me a drink, you might want to Google my name." And he was kind of just joking around. I could tell he's smiling. I was like, "Nah, it's cool. I'll buy you a drink." But I was like, "What's up?" And he was just like, I'm one of the lawyers that works with Brady, and we kind of just started like kicking up the discussion about just laws and everything like that. And he was like, "Well, what do you do?" And I was explaining to him what we do, and I had one of the cards in my pocket, and I said, like, "Yeah, we put these in like firearms boxes and stuff like that, just so people could get care." And he was looking at the card, and I remember he told me, he was just like, "This is really awesome." He's like, "Can I keep this?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And in my head, I'm like, "Yeah, keep it and show it to people because you don't think we do it, right?" And then
Yeah.
basically he's like, "Yeah, that's where I got the perception thing, because he's like, the perception is the gun industry doesn't do anything, and he's like, this is actually doing something." So you like agreed on it, right? But once again, I walked out of that room going, okay, I do more than them. That actually helps people, right? Like, all you can do is legislate. Like, that's what people fall back on when they can't get creative. And not everybody can get creative, right? I do understand that it's my family's history in the gun industry that is a big reason why I was able to get gun companies like Ruger and to do this, right? I'm not
Yeah.
naive to that, but here's the thing: it needed to be presented in the right way. Like, Brady isn't going to be able to go in and talk to Smith and Wesson and say, "I think you should do this,"
Yeah.
right? That's why
I don't
we
think
do.
they'd hear a thing they have to say.
Right.
I could be wrong.
No, you're absolutely correct, right? And that's the thing, is we need to do it ourselves. It doesn't matter if they don't listen. Let's just do it and be better than them. Let's walk
Yeah.
into the room and know that we do more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And
And
it's a cool defense too, to be able to say, like, when somebody gets wrapped up in one of these silly lawsuits, that it's like, oh, we're going to blame the manufacturer for the act of the human being. They can say, they point right at the box and be like, hey man, we tried to tell everybody, we gave them access to free and anonymous mental health screenings. And what more do you want from us? We're making an effort. Mike says something all the time. He's like, the alcohol industry started the anti-drunk driving campaign.
mm,
They did the be responsible, stay sober, get a designated driver. They didn't need .gov to tell them to do it. Cigarettes did,
hmm
but
and
the gun
public
community
perception
doesn't
on
need to do that,
cigarettes is insane
right?
compared to alcohol.
Right. Nobody
Right?
blames Johnny Walker when somebody gets behind the car and takes three people's lives. You know what I mean?
Dang
Like,
Coronas. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and,
yep.
and to that point about legislation, it's just not politically expedient to
Mm,
try to fundraise for your next election cycle off of root cause mitigation. You're like, hey man, stick with me. In 10 election cycles, the next generation will be safer because of the laws I'm passing. Nobody's funding that. But
no.
what they fund is somebody goes out and goes, I passed a magazine capacity limit. Send me back. We're saving lives. How do I know that? You'll know later. Send me. Right? So it's like, it's not politically expedient to talk about the roots of these things. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It doesn't generate revenue to say, hey, we're attacking the problem, not the symptom.
Yeah,
Same thing in my
it's
world.
it's actually a huge question that I've had, and I've concocted solutions in my mind. I'm like, if we have angsty adults, I bet we have angsty teens. I don't think that somebody goes from being a really solid kid and then has foundational skills on how to process difficult things and handle trauma as an adult, and then when they get to midlife, all of a sudden they break down and they go nuts and go postal in the truest definition of going postal. Um, I I feel like it kind of starts early and then starts compounding. I didn't finish my psychology degree, so I
Yeah, I
couldn't
was
tell
going to
you that
ask
for a
you.
fact.
Your marriage and family therapist there.
Exactly.
No, you're right. I mean, with some standalone exceptions, you don't. It's acculturated in the home, and it sounds like a bumper sticker, but it's true and it's researched. And I get that in the last couple of years we've tried to invert that thinking and say that broken homes don't matter and everybody should get a divorce and put you first and screw your kids and all that stuff. But that's all a reversal that has nothing to do with evidence based practice at all. What has stood the test of time is the nuclear unit, consistency, compassion, good boundaries, preserving children's innocence as long as possible. And then when they get exposed to whatever they get exposed to, death, dismemberment, um, you know, pornography, addiction, whatever it is, we educate as we go. So as long as I can keep my kids innocent, I will try to. And by the way, public service announcement, Jake's going to get on his soapbox. If you have young children, don't put a device in their hands at all, ever. If you have to, wait until they're at least driving and then put a phone in their hands so they can communicate, because we don't have payphones anymore. But keep the devices out of the kids' hands. Social media is toxic. Social media is the devil. It's not even a theory anymore. We have good research now. A guy I know pretty well, JD Haltigan, who's does this for a living. He studies this stuff. He works with Jonathan Haidt. Haidt's work is impressive. HAIDT, if you want to look him up. It's not even a debate anymore. Social media is ruining children. So keep control of kids, but not in the authoritarian way. Monitor what they do. Be active in their lives. Be present for them. Don't be on your own device when you're at home in the living room, in the kitchen, having dinner. When they want to play with the dinosaur for the 18th time, play with the dinosaur. Because as they grow older, they will separate from you naturally. You don't want to accelerate that process. The adult, the average run-of-the-mill adult who, quote unquote, goes crazy and shoots up the Route 91 concert from the Mandalay Bay Tower, October 1 of 2017 in Las Vegas, where Mike lives. That's not a coincidence. Like we can trace most of these mass shooters back to their childhood homes. Most of them are young anyway. That dude just happened to be older, but we can trace these homes back to brokenness, lots of addiction, isolation. I have lots of research on this, not my own, but somebody else's, and we can identify them. Now, what do we do about them is a different issue, but as a culture, as a community, as a society, we need to start paying more attention and being intentionally observant to our children. We need to protect them, and in so doing, we need to model that behavior that we want to see out of them. We have to be consistent and authentic in our own lives, because saying "do what I do, do what I say, not what I do" is not going to work. You erode your own credibility when you do that. So, I will say though, because you mentioned it, people when they hit their midlife and they go through crises, I think it has something to do with identity, and the identity has to do with the way that we speak language. And I have a whole video about this, but I'll just briefly say that when you speak words have meaning, and that meaning tells your brain something. So when I say I am in English, it sounds very permanent. Now, other languages have two different versions of the word, or the verb to be. So you could say I am, and it means something temporary. You say I am, and it means something permanent. So in Spanish, there's two different versions. And it communicates to the listening audience as well as to yourself that whatever you're dealing with is either permanent or temporary. So if you say soy hombre in Spanish, I am a man, that's not really changing. It's permanent. It's from the Ser version. Say estoy enojado, it means I am angry, meaning it's temporary, and I won't be angry forever, because the estar verb. Okay. In English, if we say I am, and then we fill it in with our occupation, for example, I am an accountant. I am an accountant. I am an accountant. And then, Bob the accountant gets to age whatever he is, and he wants to not be an accountant anymore. And he wants to retire. He will slide into a state of being where he, quote unquote, doesn't know who he is without his accountancy, because he's told himself that forever, that it's part of his core character and identity. So there's where we get the midlife crises, right? So we want to hold very loosely to the things we do and not tether them to the who we are in the inside, as God created us to be, to walk the earth, where we can be many things. Our potential is limitless.
Wow. That is incredible that you said that. Just identity and understanding who you really are, and remembering that. And even how you speak about yourself. Like, it's the idea of like, hey, I'm a podcaster, or I'm a therapist, or I'm a,
what are you without it, right?
Yeah. Like, what are
international arms dealer?
International arms dealer, notorious according to some girl at a bar somewhere.
That's right.
And understanding that, like, hey, your words can kind of influence your thoughts and emotions. That's crazy. So one thing I did want to address, and I think you guys may have some thoughts on it. You talked about um, the guy who did that horrible thing in Vegas, and a lot of people got hurt. People for a long time, and still do, they'll kind of cook up thoughts and say like, well, this is not lining up. It's a conspiracy of some sorts, and you know, I'm tempted to go down that path as well and be like, well, I don't understand any of this. So your brain starts to kind of like fill in the gaps and be like, it's got to be the CIA. And I'm sure, like in your psychologist brain, you have an understanding of how conspiracy theories work, and being in the 2A game, you can't be in the 2A space without kind of being exposed to a lot of conspiracies on who's coming after our guns and why. What's let me get this question. He's like, when you see the gun owners blaming a conspiracy versus coming up with a fix, I guess what do you think when that occurs? Like, how do you process that?
Depending on what the situation is, usually what happens is people just fall back into their comfort zone. What's easiest? We can call it the Occam's razor fallacy if you want. The simplest explanation is the best one. It's the one that people digest the easiest. It's whatever avoids the most mental taxation. I don't know, but I'll just speak in defense of what happened in Vegas. If you've ever been to a casino, nobody notices that you're carrying baggage through the lobby. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just play that devil's advocate for a second, because I can see both sides. Sure, maybe somebody turned a blind eye. Maybe there's a plant. Maybe the FBI recruited him to do this. Whatever. No, I don't buy into that. But let's just hear this out for a second. You stay in many nights in a casino. He was known to authorities. Okay, what was he known for? Were the authorities even talking? I mean, we know how government agencies work. They work at a snail's pace. You really expect them to be super responsive to like this one dude who happened to be on one agency's right, whatever. But I could absolutely do that. I could absolutely bring in a bunch of guns to a hotel room and nobody's even paying attention. And they slide open about 4 inches so you can get a crack of air in your room. Sometimes they're hermetically sealed. But could it be done by any random person? Yeah, it can. It's not that. That's the easier conclusion to draw is, dude had a bad way and was sliding off the map and decided that he was going to turn his inward aggression outward on a bunch of people. That's way easier to believe than this series of mental acrobatic hoops that I have to jump through to blame .gov. Like it's not even like, it's so hard to reach that conclusion. And for what reason? So they can take our guns, like so they can restrict bump stocks. It's like, that's dumb. Like, why would you put that many resources into that thing? It just doesn't even make sense. So, if you've never been to a casino, go to a casino sometime and try to envision how that might play out. Dude carrying some bags in with some stuff in them. Like, it happens all the time. Like Vegas doesn't really have ski resorts, but like ski bags are like huge. Like,
Jake, it's funny you bring that up. I have a friend that came into town today from LA. He's a photographer. And he was like, hey, man, can you meet me at the Palms? Like, I don't have much time, but I want to see you. I was like, yeah, we'll get together, like, get something to eat. So he drove in, and I was helping him bring his photography equipment up to the room. We had to make 2 trips. Dude, photography equipment, like the cases, look exactly
like DJ equipment.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, yeah, we're probably going to get stopped by security, I'm assuming, because like 2 reasons. I always heard that you're not supposed to film in hotel rooms and stuff like that, or like, you know what I mean? So I thought that was going to trigger it. But I was like, yeah, these definitely look like rifle cases. Not one person stopped us.
No, because there's like 7,000 people on the casino floor and 8 security. You know what I mean? Like, no, it's not even possible.
We had to show the key to go past the security to get up.
Oh, you're at the
yeah.
The elevator. Yeah.
You think they know what rifle cases look like? First of all, like there's a lot of security guys who really don't understand guns. Like, first of all,
it's true. But I'm thinking all the everything you do, people are watching. But it's just funny because like where did that whole thing, like, there is no random stops. Like, we technically could have brought up like 15 to 20 rifles in those things. Easy,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I suppose kind of like the follow up to that, and then we'll wrap. I'm seeing that we're kind of at time. Um, how can we go from cooking up these conspiracies, and we might have addressed this a little bit earlier, to actually saying like, okay, we're faced with another issue. How can we not like compromise, but how can we adjust to make sure that we are being proactive and other people don't feel like, well, you're not policing yourself, so we have to come in and be mom. Like,
Yeah,
how do
well,
we? Yeah.
the first thing that I think we need to understand, because we're talking about October 1, especially, right? Like, 67 people die by suicide by firearm. I think we always need to bring people back to that. Um, these mass shootings are tragic, and I would never belittle them, but it's amazing to me when I first started this organization, how many people in the mental health field were pushing me back to suicide prevention. And I was like, no, I want to, that's cool. I want to do that. But I also want to do, I want to work on resources for, outreach and stuff like that to try to prevent mass shootings. It took me a while to understand it. Um, there's no such thing as Minority Report. Like, you can't see into the future. You could take 10 people
Right.
that have bipolar disorder, hand them a firearm, and they will never do anything to themselves or anybody else. And I can come home and catch my wife in bed and snap. So I think it's always important to shift the focus back to the 67 people that die every day by suicide by firearm, because that is a mass shooting every day. If you think about it, that gets no attention from the media because it doesn't sell ad space. Right. So for me, I think that's always first and foremost. People are always going to say, okay, you don't do anything, right? But that's why it's important for us to do that. Because once you say that to people, once you say there is an October 1, there's more than an October 1 every day. It really makes people think, especially anti-gunners, because they're like, wow, that is really a big issue. So,
Yeah.
Jake,
59 people died in that incident. 58 innocents plus the shooter. And I think somebody died later that they didn't initially count, but 59 is the thing. And the number has steadily crept up, unfortunately, of firearm suicides annually. And so Mike says 67 per day. That's the number of people who take their lives every day with a gun. You have more than a 1 October, which is the largest mass shooting in U.S. history, not counting certain conflicts that people don't count, that are lost to history and memory hold. But you have more than a 1 October every single day in this country, every single day, and we're supposed to be gravitated to and sensationalized by the 3 people in the shopping center that got shot because they told us to be sensationalized by it. Media, and I'm not saying there's this big they out there. I know who the they is. The they is the media. I have a journalism undergrad. I know what pays. I know what marketing does. You get paid through advertisements. Advertisements go to where clicks are. Clicks are driven by emotional functioning. And I'm pointing to if you can't see me, I'm pointing to the center and the rear part of my brain where your limbic system is. And I talk about this in my emotional functioning series. You want to learn about how your brain works, you'll learn to control it. And if you know that you're being prompted through headlines and yellow journalism to have a fear response or an excitement response, to act in accordance, to do something about that, you'll have better control and you'll return reason and rationality, which is your frontal lobe, to not just go jumping at everything that's thrown your way. So, okay, there's a mass shooting. When define mass, right? Gun Violence Archive defined a mass shooting as any shooting where 3 or more people are present, not injured, present. And that's just disingenuous. So that's how they get the whole, like, we're having 3 mass shootings a day. It's like, okay, yeah, somebody accidentally or negligently, because we're trying to change out language too, negligently discharged a firearm in a grocery store and 6 people saw it. That's a mass shooting by Gun Violence Archive's definition, which is ridiculous. But let's say that all these mass shootings are happening. All right, you got 3 people dead over here and 6 over there. And then the next day we turn the page and there's another 2 people, but a couple are injured. It still doesn't account for 67 suicides, right? So you want to move the needle on quote unquote gun violence. address suicides. How do you address suicides? Mental illness. Because even though suicide is often impulsive, a stable person doesn't get impulsive to the point that they take their own life, which to conclude, we have a campaign that's addressing that too. We talk about innovations and throwing, restriction off the backs and doing things ourselves. Talk about Cause a Pause, Mike.
Yeah, Cause of Pause is just something that we worked with uh, a lot of the safe manufacturers, right? And it was something that Rob Pink has kind of brought to our attention. And it was basically like on your safe or where you store your gun, keep a picture of something you love or someone you love, right? So, like downstairs in my safe, if we were to go down to where my big safe is, right? There's two pictures of my daughters, right? Because those are the people that, if I was in crisis, those are the only faces that could stop it. I know that. You know what I mean? Because I put them here. I'm going to hopefully they're going to see me out, but things like that, right? That just bring it back to everything is temporary, and there is something to live for, no matter how you feel, and you can go get help as a gun owner. So that's what
My
comes.
sorry, I was rustling. I thought I was on mute, but I was digging through my backpack to find a sticker. I'm going to hold it up for the camera. On my safe is the Guns Mental Health podcast sticker, because if I ever, God forbid I do, I don't plan on it, but if I ever get in that dark space where I think that taking my own life is the way out of my pain, and let's be clear, by the way, most people who want to die by their own hand don't actually want to die. They want the pain to end. So
Yeah.
we got to figure out how to get the pain to end in a more creative way than just self-death. But I put the podcast sticker on my safe because I think that if I were to take my own life, it would invalidate all the work that I've done and all the people that I've helped along the way. So that's what stopped me from doing it. If I were to get to that point, we also have a really cool sticker that says Guns Mental Health Podcast with our own caricature faces on it. So I'd literally be looking at Mike and me characterized on this sticker with a little microphone between us. I'm like, I can't do this to Mike. Hopefully I would step away.
That's
On a side note, Jake, my daughter, the other day in the car, she's like, "I know you'll never take your own life. I don't have to worry about that." And I was like, "Why? Why are you saying that?" Because we were listening to something on the radio. They were talking about suicide. My daughter goes, "Because of all the work you've done, it would just totally be pointless." So she has that same theory in her head. I forgot to
wow.
tell you. Yeah.
That's
Kids are
cool.
funny.
That's really cool.
Kids are hilarious. It's really interesting that you say that because about Jake saying that people who go down this path, they're not necessarily wanting to kill themselves. They're trying to make this pain stop. And we look at, let's say, Canada and some other countries that are exploring the assisted death
Oh, made.
thing,
Yeah.
and a lot of the new problems that are popping up. I know you've seen them, and it's like, man, this concept is, well, I have chronic pain, it'll never stop, and I want to go out with dignity. I'll stop it myself. And I'm not here to advocate for or against. I'm generally against such things just because I think your life was given to you by God, and I think you have so much more value than any pain can bring to you. And I do understand, and I'm empathetic to pain, but I do think that whoever's listening, you guys here right with me right now, your life has incredible value, and you can do so much. And I could get emotional thinking about it, but I
Yeah.
think,
Stephen Hawking
yeah.
didn't punch out.
Yeah,
Stephen Hawking made
he
a
had a
hell
lot
of an
of,
imprint on the world, and he had a lot of reasons. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Christopher Reeve could have done it. There's so
Mhm.
many people who have Michael J. Fox. There's lots and lots of people who opted instead to go forward, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to note. And when we talk about suicide intervention, which I do a lot of in my work, um, we want to focus on protective factors. A lot of people focus on risk factors. Let's talk about the reasons you want to die. And I'm like, no, let's talk about why you're not dead yet. You've been suicidal for a
Yeah.
while. Why aren't you dead yet? Well, because my kids or whatever. It's like, all right, cool. Hold on to that. Let that be the reason you stay living, right? And then that becomes preventative, not intervention, right? It's prevention.
Mm.
I don't want to get to postvention. Postvention sucks. So if we can do preventative mental well care, if we can know our emotional functioning well, if we can have a purpose, if we can be anchored in some sort of doctrine or principle that guides us and frames us and moors us to reality, then we don't have to be adrift in the sea of life, tossed among the storms and tumult that life brings, right? We know where we return to, and that's valuable and it's good, and it gives us something to which we can shoot and aim, and I think that eliminates a lot of the reasons that people end up sliding into wanting to self-harm or self-delete. If you have a purpose and a reason, then the alternative doesn't even factor in. It doesn't
That's
even
right.
knock at your door, right? So elevating your eyeballs and learning to focus on the things that matter, I think, is very, very important. And our culture is a little bit threatened right now. There's some stuff that's trying to erode that, which is why conversations like this are important. We need to keep having them and reaffirming that people are going the right direction. They have merit, they have value, they have worth. You are worthy. You are, desired, and you may not see it yet. But just because the pathway you're walking is shrouded in fog doesn't mean that it continues to some place desirable. Don't stop walking. Keep pushing, and eventually the fog lifts.
Yeah, eventually the fog lifts. Gentlemen, we're kind of at the end of our time. I think I've kept you over quite a bit, actually. But
My bladder's about to burst, but that's
there you
cool.
go. I do want to just make sure that you guys, if there's any like last little words you wanted to say, or even just letting people know where they can find you, go. Jake, you're first.
If Mike was about to speak, poor guy.
Oh, was he?
No, I was about to just say, look at Walk the Talk US on all social media platforms, right? Twitter, Instagram, WGTA.org. We're a pretty responsive organization, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But Jake, promote the new album. Go ahead.
New album drops 2023, and we can't wait to top the charts. No, but we are focusing this year on building our 50 state directory of firearms practitioners of all healthcare stripes. So it's not just mental health; it can be anything in healthcare. If you're in a practice that you think aligns with what we're trying to do, which is improve access to care for gun owners without rights restriction, please consider taking our course and then list yourself for free in our directory. I think that's going to go a long way to helping a lot of people. But WTTA.org is where you can reach that. If you want to look into those videos that I was talking about your own emotional functioning, zephyrwellness.org, ZEPHYR wellness.org. And I'm not just trying to get clicks for my YouTube channel or whatever. It's like I'm trying to push information out into the public so that y'all can learn what I know that I learned through grad school and all this experience, so you can solve your own problems and stop coming through my damn door. Like, I'm trying to work myself out of a job, and I'm serious about that. Like, if I can literally eliminate mental illness, I will be happy to do any other work to pay my bills, because it means that I will be working in a community that's free from playground bullying and couples arguing in the grocery store and suicidal ideation and homicides. And like, if everybody's just happy and healthy, I'll throw paint on walls and drive forklift or go back to food service or whatever. So consume the content, please, and help yourselves. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake Wisk, JakeWisk.
There you go. Thank you so much to the both of you, the Guns and Mental Health Podcast, and of course to you, the awesome listener, for staying this long. Hopefully, if you've been able to take a bathroom break, unlike Jake. Sorry, Jake. And of course, the best way.
I'm in agony.
The best way to support what we're doing is to join us on Patreon. From there, you'll get the link to the private Discord to kind of be in a lot of these conversations. And of course, if be the first one to kind of know about some different stuff and some exclusive content on that side. And of course, armed_Atlas on Instagram and most other platforms. Till next time, keep it costly.